صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى روحك وبدنك الطاهرة. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والصابئون والنصارى من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وعمل صالحا فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The similarities between John the Baptist, or Yahya ibn Zakaria, and Imam Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein alayhum as-salam are uncanny. Upon further examination into the biographies of these men of God and martyrs in the way of God, one cannot help but accept the fact that history definitely repeats itself. During the days leading up to the holy month of Muharram, the followers and lovers of Sayyid al-Shuhada will begin preparing themselves mentally and spiritually for the holy month of Muharram, either by reciting the various ad'iyat, supplications, or the ziyarat of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. During the month of Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah, you might find many people reciting Dua Arafah of Imam Hussain, or the various supplications uttered from the lips of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam, in order to mentally prepare themselves from the plethora of lessons that is the holy month of Muharram from Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. However, when we examine Sayyid al-Shuhada himself preceding the days of Muharram, one finds him remembering a particular individual that the majority of followers and lovers of Imam al-Hussein are usually not thinking about much during the months and days previous to Muharram. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam states that on the way to Karbala, my father, Abi Abdullah, would constantly be seen remembering one man, and that was Yahya ibn Zakaria, or John the Baptist. Imam Zainul Abidin mentions that before we arrived Karbala, and even during Karbala, there was a lot of dhikr and mentioning of Nabiullah Yahya by Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And so the irony is, many of us love to focus primarily, and rightfully so, only on Sayyid al-Shuhada during the days leading to Muharram. However, when we look at Sayyid al-Shuhada during those particular days, his mind was on someone in particular, and that was John the Baptist, because we understand that the fate both of them ultimately met were very similar. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes reference to Nabiullah Yahya or John the Baptist in the Holy Quran multiple times. But in this particular verse we had just recited, in chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 69 of the Holy Quran, Allah mentions Nabiullah Yahya indirectly by referencing the followers and Shia of Nabi Yahya at the time. Because Nabiullah Yahya, son of Zakaria, had a movement previous to the coming of Jesus alayhi salam. Now, Imam al-Hussein finds Nabi Yahya as someone he takes inspiration from, in order that we can come and look at the both of them and take the ultimate amount of inspiration from. When we look at the verse in mention, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references the group, because many lovers of Sayyid al-Shuhada would not be able to tell you what were the group that followed Nabiullah Yahya called. We can tell you the group who followed Nabi Isa alayhi salam, the Masihiyyin, or the followers of Musa, the Yahud, or the Muslimin of Rasulullah, and ultimately the universality of Islam is one that completes the message of all prophets of Allah, definitely. However, with each prophet came a group of people who adhered to his message that society decided to give a title to. Hence why we are only Muslims, but Rasulullah called us the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and we say that proudly. During the time of John the Baptist, however, he had his group, and they were called the Sabi'ah. And Aba Abdullah, when he mentions Nabiullah Yahya alayhi salam, it's important to us, lovers of Sayyid al-Shuhada, during the month of Muharram, to also take reference in this man's life and the lessons he has to offer. If the man we commemorate during the months of Muharram and Safar, and ultimately whenever we drink water, mentions this man as a source of inspiration for Shahada, then it's paramount that we also look at who this man is and what he is all about. The Sabi'ah, however, mentioned in this verse are a very unique group of individuals. Allah begins by stating, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا Indeed, those who have believed, وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا And those who were Jews, or Jews, Hadu from Yahud, those who were Jewish, وَالصَّابِئُونَ وَالنَّصَارَى And the Christians, مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ And those who believed in the last day and did good, وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا And this is very important. We always see Iman mixed with good conduct. We see, for example, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَوَاصَوْا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ Do good and have belief at the same time. And so Allah would state here, مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا As a very clear indication, it's not enough to just believe, you also have to do good at the same time. لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ They should not have any need to fear. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ And nor should they grieve and have immense sadness, because ultimately paradise is awaiting them. Many have looked at this verse and have examined the Saba into this verse as a group of individuals who are part of Ahlul Kitab. However, when we look at the reality of Ahlul Kitab today, the people of the book, we normally label them as Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Not many include the Saba into this group for some odd reason, even when the Quran has made reference to them. Because the Saba today and the Saba then, many will come and distinguish differences. However, let's examine the ayah and see what is made clear in this particular beautiful verse within the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 69. Allah is making it clear that if you were Christian, if you were a Sabian, if you were Jewish, and if you believed in the last day and God and did good in your life, no need to fear. Don't be a person who has grief, because you're going to heaven ultimately. Many have looked at this verse in the Holy Quran and said, why the need on emphasizing Islam? If Allah has said, if you're Christian and you're a genuine Christian, and you're Jewish and you're a genuine Jew, and you're a Sabian and you did all these things where you had belief and you did good, ultimately don't be a fearful individual. You'll go to heaven eventually. So why necessarily emphasize on Islam as the only way to go when Allah said, there are other ways as well, that you don't even need to have fear. Many of us, we live our whole lives believing we did everything we needed to do. All our obligations we upheld. And we've never oppressed another individual. However, we don't have that confidence. We still have the hesitation that, did I do enough? Did I, do enough? You find even Lady Zainab alayha salam on the 10th of Muharram, she raises her blessed hands and say, Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Oh Allah, accept from us this sacrifice, because there's always an emphasis on giving back. We need to do more. There's more that we need to do. We haven't done enough. So Allah, please accept. And we even add, Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qaleel, accept from us the little that we have done. Even though in the eyes of many, it's a lot of work and a lot of effort was put into place. Nonetheless, these individuals will come and tell you that it's not necessary. Why focus on Islam? The irony of all ironies is that they're using the Holy Quran to tell you it's not only the Holy Quran you should also accept or only believe in. If you're a Christian and you're a genuine Christian, that's all you need. When you use the Quran to then say you don't need to use the Quran because the Quran makes reference to other places so that you justify that interesting view is quite a contradiction ultimately at the end of the day. That is ultimately not the tafsir of this verse. Many have said, la, this applies to the Christians and Jews and the Sabians and anyone who believes in God and does great things and so on, who have yet to receive the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who didn't receive the message of Islam. These individuals do not need to have fear. Why does Allah in the beginning say, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا? الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا in the beginning is a concentration on the Muslims. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا. Is there anything besides Christians, Jews, Sabians, Muslims as far as the Abrahamic family of religions are concerned? No. So, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا is in reference to the Muslims. This is in reference, others have said, to those who have yet to receive the message of Islam. The message of Islam didn't come to them. So if they were Christians and they were Sabians and they were Jews, then that's it. They can still go to heaven. That applies to not just Christians and Jews. That applies to anyone. It even applies to the atheist. A person who did not receive the hujjah, did not see the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their own eyes as an individual, that Allah will not judge. Why didn't you accept Islam? My Lord, I didn't get Islam. Because many ask the question, will non-Muslims go to heaven? Will people who have never seen or heard about Islam enter heaven in the Islamic worldview? If they never heard about Islam, why would Allah punish them? You've never heard of it. It's not my fault. Or the Islam they heard of was the very violent, incorrect, misinterpreted version of Islam that many people like to espouse today. I would be the first to reject that type of religion. Seeing something that is bloody and barbaric and is compelling and forces you to believe and otherwise you will be killed is not an Islam, a religion anyone would follow for that matter. This is in reference, according to the books of exegesis, to the groups of individuals who followed the way of their prophets previous to Islam, and this includes the Muslims as well. Because many asked the Holy Prophet of Islam, our grandparents were never Muslims, but what does that mean for their destiny? Are they individuals, our grandfathers, our forefathers? They may have been necessarily, they could have been Sabians, or our grandparents were Jews, our grandparents were Christians. We got lucky, we became Muslim and we gave allegiance to the Prophet in his lifetime. But what does that mean for our parents? So the reverse came to explain, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالصَّابِئُونَ وَالنَّصَارَى مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Those who believed were Jews, Sabians, Christians, believed in God, the last day, did good, no need to fear, and they are with their Lord, and He is such a merciful Lord. This makes reference to the Sabians, however. Many Muslims today see this verse and don't really know who the Sabians are. The Sabi'ah are those who followed, they were basically the followers of Nabiullah Yahya ibn Zakaria alayhum as-salam. The Sabi'ah were a group that Nabiullah Yahya had and were the disciples he was teaching. Nabiullah Yahya preceded Jesus by a couple years. Yahya and Jesus are relatives because his father is Nabiullah Zakaria, Prophet Zechariah, and Jesus, his mother is Lady Maryam alayha salam. Lady Maryam, her mother, according to some traditions, her name in the English is Anna, and the daughter of Imran, or Maryam, she is or sorry, Maryam, and the wife of Imran. Maryam is the daughter of this Imran, this prophet Imran. Jesus is the grandson of Imran. And however, the mother of Mary, she had a sister according to traditions by the name of Elizabeth, or according to the Arabic, Elizabeth. Elizabeth married Nabiullah Zakaria. So these two sisters, they did really good. They got lucky. They married prophets of God. One, Prophet Zakaria, the other, Nabiullah Imran. Nabiullah Imran had Lady Maryam. His grandson was Jesus. Zakaria had Yahya. So Yahya and Maryam would be considered first cousins. And so Jesus to Yahya would be, Jesus would be his cousins to Yahya. Yahya would be the cousin of his mother. Ultimately, that is their relation. They were born a few years before one another. And so they were very close. And Yahya, his title is known as Yahya al-Mu'ammadan, or John the Baptist. And Ta'meed is baptism. And so John the Baptist, known for the element of baptism, the practice of baptizing, he was baptized by Jesus. And Jesus was also baptized by him. When you submerge yourself in water, or you are submerged by a clerical figure in water for spiritual purity, you find that even some depictions out there show these middle-aged men in Christendom, they show these men, one baptizing the other in the river Jordan. And this was the reality of the matter. Baptism is not a practice found in Islam today, even though it was amongst the practices of the Sharia of Prophet John the Baptist and Prophet Jesus, alayhum salam. Why is that the case? Because we all believe and accept that every religion that comes after the previous one or the preceding one is a religion that adds to it, but also subtracts from it. You find society, as it evolves and progresses, it requires additions and subtractions. For example, during the time of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, there was no baptism. Isa then came and added baptism, but he also got rid of a few practices as well that were legitimately from the Sharia, because every society is subjective and circumstantial to their social societal norms at the time that are not going to be practiced and found later on in the future. So additions and subtractions are necessary. Musa alayhi salam, he, for example, made it forbidden in his Sharia to consume the white fat from meat. So the marbling fat within meat, bovine, beef, whatever, that was forbidden to consume. Musa alayhi salam really wanted to discipline his followers in that manner, such that the foundations are built firm for the coming of Jesus, for the coming of Christ. The foundations were firm, they were, you can imagine it, being constructed upon, and then Rasulullah was that wonderful cherry on top of this beautiful, beautiful culmination of the prophetic message of the holy prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore you find it was a practice, but not currently a practice. In Islam we have the metaphorical ta'meed, one would say, the metaphorical baptism of purifying one's spirituality, one's soul. But physically, no, not necessarily, because ultimately when we perform wudu, when we do ablution, wudu is not meant to physically only clean you, spiritually as well. That's why I can't just get water and throw it the direction of where I need to do wudu. I have to do it in a certain manner, from up to down, from the elbow to the tips of the fingers, not a spot missed. That interesting set of rules is for not only my physical body to be purified, it's for my spiritual body as well. So the concept of baptism in its entirety, from the Christian perspective of the true teachings of Jesus, no, not found today in Islam. However, Nabiullah Yahya was known to be one who baptized Jesus, and then Isa alayhi salam came and baptized him. Nabiullah Yahya, of course, preceded Jesus by a couple years. And there had been a king at the time, the very well-known story, who wanted to marry his wife, according to various books of literature, his wife's daughter from a previous marriage, or he wanted to marry his niece, because he could not have a son, and he wanted to maintain the royal kingship within his family and the royalty within the family. So he needed a kid. His wife wasn't able to provide him a son, so she was saying, marry my daughter from my previous marriage. The king didn't think this was smart. At the time, this was during, he lived in the greater Levant, the Sham region. So he's like, let me consult a scholar. So the king, no better scholar than Prophet Yahya alayhi salam, he approached him and he said to him, listen, can I do this? Is this allowed to do? Can I marry? Nabi Yahya said, no. This is against the rule of Allah and it's morally wrong. You can't do that. The king returned and he told his wife what had happened. She says, no, go back and insist. He went and asked, he says, no, it's haram. You cannot marry your wife's daughter from a previous marriage, even though she's not biologically related to you. She's your wife's current daughter. She's clearly bad. You can never make a move on her. She's mahram to you. You can't marry that individual. The king went back and the wife was very dissatisfied, the queen. So one day she got him extremely drunk and she had brought her daughter, or according to other books of literature, his niece, and she had virtually made her unclothed. And he wanted to approach her, but she said to him, no, you can't. If you want her, kill Yahya. He was like, no, why? Kill a prophet of God? No, it's not smart. But obviously being under the influence of both your sexual desires and alcohol, you can make horrible decisions as a result. And so he said, you know what, fine. Or bring Yahya to the court. They brought Nabiullah Yahya, John the Baptist, alayhi salam, to the court, and he had him beheaded. He was beheaded, and Jesus alayhi salam assumed that role of prophethood from that moment on. Now, he was already a prophet, not to undermine that, but the mission began as soon as this previous prophet ended his role and was martyred in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similar to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His mission began when he was 40. He was always a prophet previous to then. We in the school of Ahlul Bayt believe the prophets don't become prophets. They don't develop their way to becoming prophets. They don't start as laymen, then scholars, then servants, then slaves of God, then prophets. No. They are destined, it's a covenant from Allah that they will be prophets, and then the nur and illumination of the Holy Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt was already created while Adam was still between mud and water. And so Rasulullah was destined to begin anyways. However, his mission started when society was ripe enough and ready for that final mission of Islam. Jesus alayhi salam, he was about 30 years old when Nabiullah Yahya was martyred. So the years that we see Jesus being persecuted and with his disciples and sharing his teachings to the world and ultimately risen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were only in these last 3 years. Where was Isa alayhi salam during the struggle of, let's say, John the Baptist? Nabiullah Isa was known to travel a lot. Amongst the reasons why they say he is called al-Masih, one of the opinions is from the word yasih, or if you've seen the ayah, قُلْ سِيحُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, travel the world. كَانَ يَسِيح الْأَرْضِ, he would travel the earth a lot. So Isa alayhi salam was reported to have gone to Lebanon, was reported to have gone to Egypt and stayed there for about 9 years according to some ahadith. And so he traveled the world a lot. He was on his mission, of course, but his prophetic mission began right after the prophet before him finished his mission ultimately and returned back to his Lord. And one would imagine these two were extremely close to one another. Isa alayhi salam began his role. The followers of Nabiullah Yahya were called the Sabi'ah. They transitioned and followed Isa alayhi salam. The Sabi'ah comes from the word, or the Sabi'ah, the Sabians, the Sabi'ah al-Mandaniyun, the Sabi'ah come from the term Saba'a, to transfer or transition. It comes from the idea of transitioning from evil to goodness, from darkness to light. And so the Sabi'ah, the Holy Prophet of Islam at one point was called a Sabi' because he transferred Saba'a min dini Bani Quraysh. He transitioned on a tangent away from the belief of Banu Quraysh. He was never on it, but he made it clear he was off it. He's never in par with that view. And since he was called a Hanif of the way of Ibrahim, from the term munharif, meaning to go off tangent, because Nabi Ibrahim was the first to go off tangent, not the first, but made it extremely clear from the belief of his society. You all can worship statues, I'll worship the Lord. So he went off tangent. They said that's a very munharif thing to do, a very off tangent thing to do. So he was called the Hanif. Those who followed his way would be called those who are Hanif in the way of Millat Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Rasulullah was on the way of Ibrahim, Hanif, and so was Abu Talib. As much as they could make him a kafir, he was a Hanif, rahmatullah, salamullahi alayhi as well. Abdul Muttalib, Abu Talib, Abdullah, Lady Khadija, Amir al-Mu'minin in his youth, they were all Hanifs. From that understanding of getting off tangent, as Ibrahim alayhi salam was off tangent from the way and belief of his society at the time. Sabi'a or saba'a means to leave as well, to transition from something to a better thing at the same time. The Sabi'a, however, or the Sabians, as you might see this verse translated as, they are individuals who still share that view of Prophet Yahya being the final messenger of God. And ironically, they do not believe in the prophethood and messengership of Prophet Jesus alayhi salam. Even though they were alongside one another, they respectfully do not believe Isa was a prophet. Yahya was the last of these. The Sabi'a, however, in their fundamentals, the Sabians, what they believe in is that Prophet Muhammad was not a prophet of God. So wasn't Isa alayhi salam, as well as Ibrahim. So can one say they're Abrahamic? No, not in the literal definition of the term. But they also follow the previous other prophets of Allah. They put an emphasis on Nabiullah Adam. And they claim to have the Adamite scrolls and knowledge and information, especially Sheath. Enoch, Idris, Enosh, Sheath is son as well, with a huge emphasis on Prophet Noah alayhi salam, and not Musa. So they don't believe in the prophet of Musa, so they reject the Torah, the Talmud obviously, they reject the Bible, and so that has led to some individuals claiming they're not Ahlul Kitab, because they don't believe in these books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can they be Ahlul Kitab? And however, contrary to that opinion, As-Sayyid al-Khoi, Ayatollah al-Udma, As-Sayyid al-Khoi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi wa qaddasallahu sirra, did believe they were Ahlul Kitab. They're mentioned in the Quran. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالصَّابِئُونَ. They are individuals who لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. They should not have any fear, and they should not be grieving or sad or anything like that. They're mentioned in the Quran in this manner, then they're indeed individuals who are from the people of the book. Some say, no, their belief now is not the same. Yahya made it clear that Isa was right after him. So how could they still be on the way of Yahya when Isa was right after him, then the Holy Prophet? So they don't share the pure views of Nabi Yahya at the time. I ask you, who today still shares the pure views of the Prophet at the time? Christians today, we believe in our worldview. Jesus never claimed to be the Son of God, nor the Trinitarian belief system, nor these aspects of let's reject the Torah, this New Testament trumps that one now. The tithing is not an obligation. Shellfish is allowed to be consumed now. Whatever was an obligation in the previous Old Testament is no longer an obligation in the New Testament. We don't believe in that. We respectfully reject that. But the Christians today believe in that, but they're still Ahlul Kitab. The Jews, likewise, we reject that the belief of the Jews today is necessarily the 100% pure version that Musa alayhi salam taught. Many Muslims for that matter, how many Muslims differ and bicker about the Holy Prophet and their version of the Holy Prophet? Some have a very violent version. Some have a very rude version of Rasulullah where he frowns at blind men. Others have this version. Others have a version of incompetence where he dies and doesn't care to elect a leader. Until today we have this mess of no, this is it, or this is right, or this group is wrong. Others say no. Prophet of Islam made it clear. Others have a version where it does make no fallacy intellectually, nor does it go off tangent from the true pure view. So many people still argue about the version of Islam, the version of Christianity. However, the ulama have made it clear these individuals are still Christians. These individuals, you are still a Muslim, irrespective of having not entirely a complete understanding, pure version of Islam. Although every group will tell you we have the whole entire version, we have this, we have that. Nonetheless, the Sahaba are the same way. Those who claim they're not Ahlul Kitab because they have different views are not individuals that understand that every single religion ultimately has a difference now than it did have then with regard to their fundamentals and principles. Hence why our Maraja still say that they are from Ahlul Kitab. We can marry from them, for example. They're not considered spiritually impure. The Sabi'a, others have pointed, well, Sayyid Sistani doesn't think they are Ahlul Kitab. What's that all about? There are versions of Sabi'ah. You may have seen that there are versions of Muslims, versions of Christians. You got the St. Clement Parish, the Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, the Protestant, multiple versions, the Sunni, the Shi'i, of every single mainstream organized religion. So do they. And so there was an offshoot group called Sabi'at Harran, or the Sabians of Haran. Haran or Harran is a city in Syria. In that region, there were a group of pagans, according to multiple books of literature, who were being persecuted by a very violent Muslim empire at the time, being killed, like they were being persecuted to death. And so in order to preserve their lives, they decided to claim that they were Sabians, and aren't Sabians Ahlul Kitab according to the Quran, in order to preserve their life. And so these Sabians, or Sabi'at Harran, or the Sabians of Harran, are individuals who had paganistic views in their theology, such as worshipping the planets and the stars and whatnot. Sabians today was like, no, we don't worship the planets. The Sabians, where are they found? The Sabi al-Mindaniyin. They are found primarily, well, they're found everywhere in the world, as the diaspora of many people are found everywhere as well, but primarily in Iraq, and more specifically south of Iraq, Basra, alhamdulillah, where I come from. South of Iraq, Basra, some parts of Nasiriyah, primarily where the Tigris and the Euphrates are, because baptism is an integral part within their belief system. To be baptized, they have ceremonial events of prayer where they all gather and they live near the water such that they're able to baptize themselves. So that's why devout Sabians try their hardest to be close to these rivers so that they can ensure their teachings of baptism is still found and being upheld. The Sabians are mentioned in the Holy Book. Nabiullah Yahya alayhi salam is referenced in the Quran through this group. Yahya alayhi salam's group, the Sabians, are mentioned 3 times by name in the Holy Quran. The Sabi'ah today, we will agree that they don't necessarily follow the same teachings of Yahya alayhi salam, but nonetheless, I mean, the same goes for the Christians, the Jews, many Muslims out there. And so that's why our ulama, some of them, a majority of them, have said, no, these guys are on the way of Allah. But even with a few, diverging opinions, nonetheless, they're still Ahlul Kitab. And they were persecuted for many years. There are roughly about 10,000 of them found in the southern Iraq. Their numbers don't exceed the hundreds of thousands at all globally. So they're a minority group. And subhanAllah, how Iraq holds and cradles minority groups very closely. From the Yazidis to the Sabians, to the various other religious minority groups that truly contributes to the heritage of Iraq and its richness and culture, and are meant to be honored, because the Sabians are those who revere the Ahlul Bayt, ironically. Yes, they may not recognize the prophethood of Rasulullah, nor Musa, nor Isa, but they still, with the influence of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt around them, contribute to walking pilgrimage to Aba Abdullah. There's a mawqib called the mawqib of the Sabi'ah, mawqib al-Sabi'iyin or the Sabi'iyun, where they gather during the days of Arba'in, 40 days after the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, where they distribute food and they walk to the haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada. They are lovers of Imam Ali alayhi salam, for they recognize that Imam Ali during his Khilafah and establishment gave them rights, recognized their existence, did not persecute them as other caliphs did. Amir al-Mu'mineen recognized them and honored them to the extent necessary. And so they're also lovers of Ahlul Bayt, and they revere Sayyid al-Shuhada. And during these days they are also in their hundreds, in their thousands, mourning Imam Hussain. In the south of Iraq, I had the pleasure to come and see them in their ceremony of worship when they baptize one another in the lake. And it was truly a sight that inspires one to look and study at other worldviews and other religions, and ultimately a group that the Quran has made reference to. They honor Nabiullah Yahya alayhi salam, and we honor Nabiullah Yahya. And as a result, we found Aba Abdullah Salamullahi alayhi also honoring Nabiullah Yahya, especially the days preceding Muharram, we find him mentioning Nabi Yahya, because the similarities, as mentioned at the beginning, are uncanny. Both of them were martyred in the way of God. Both of them, however, were born prematurely. The ahadith indicate Sayyid al-Shuhada was born 6 months, and Yahya alayhi salam was born after 6 months. Both of them were chosen by their Lord. Both of them had the followers, even though they were small in number. Both of them spoke against the king and ruler of their time. And both of them were martyred by that same evil ruler who was only motivated by his what? Desires, lustful desires. Compare these two kings, the king at the time of Yahya and the king at the time of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. These two were known as what? Womanizers. They would commit adultery left, right, and center. This man, he committed adultery. And they were both known as alcoholics. Yazid, a high alcoholic. And this man would be easily seen getting drunk every single day. Both of them fought against these individuals and were martyred. And the tradition states, with both of these prophets, the sky expressed its sadness by raining blood. The martyrdom of Yahya left a worldly impact, for the heavens was crying over his martyrdom. And the traditions continue. His blessed head, John the Baptist, he had his blessed head carried in a golden platter. Abu Abdullah had his head carried in a golden platter as well. Killed by kings from Sham, from the greater Levant region. If you go to Masjid al-Amawi, the Umayyad castle right now, that place, you will find a grave, John the Baptist, Yahya ibn Zakaria, killed by these rulers from the same region. And after they were killed, their blessed head spoke. Nabi Yahya had his head speak, and Abu Abdullah salamullahi alayh had his head speak as well. You find both of them have many similarities. However, one more similarity is important not to forget. Yahya alayhi salam was baptized, and so was Abu Abdullah. But Yahya was baptized by the water of the Jordanian river, the cool, clear water of that river, by Prophet Isa alayhi salam, in the most spiritual and beautiful of ways. Whereas Abu Abdullah was baptized with his own blood, salamullahi alayh, in the most gruesome of ways, fighting the enemy of Allah on the time and on the world at the time. However, with Sayyid al-Shuhada and with Nabiullah Yahya, one man stands clear as truly a man who represented their morals, the morals of Sayyid al-Shuhada and the prophetic morals of Nabiullah Yahya. And that was none other than Ali al-Akbar. The morals of Sayyid al-Shuhada being the oldest, Ali al-Akbar of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the morals of Prophet Yahya being the one who closely resembled a prophet of God. كان أشبه الناس إذا اشتقنا جدنا رسول الله, according to Abu Abdullah. We would look at Ali al-Akbar. نظرنا إليه فقد كان أشبه الناس بالحبيب منطقا وخلقا وكرامة برسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. If we ever missed to see our grandfather, for the Ahlul Bayt lost their holy grandfather when they were young, Sayyidah Zainab, Imam Hussain, Imam Hussain. What they would do is they would look at Ali al-Akbar, for he was the combination of the prophetic light of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and might of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and ultimately martyrdom of Yahya ibn Zakaria. When Ali al-Akbar made his way to his beloved father, Ali al-Akbar was the first from the family of Sayyid al-Shuhada to give their life on the line. And Ali al-Akbar asked from his father, let me go. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was represented on that day by Ali al-Akbar. And so Abu Abdullah sees Ali al-Akbar and he has a hard time sending him off to war. And so the response didn't come easy from Sayyid al-Shuhada. He didn't give the reply. Ali al-Akbar insisted. And then what had happened was Ali al-Akbar was finally granted that permission. He enters the field like a raging lion and kills, according to multiple traditions, over 100 of these enemies of Allah on earth. He kills them and rids the world from their evil presence. Ali al-Akbar returns back to Sayyid al-Shuhada, but this time in complaint. And he said to his father, Aba Abdullah, my beloved father, is there water to drink? For the thirst has taken me. A hadith says Sayyid al-Shuhada allowed Ali al-Akbar to see his blessed tongue and feel his tongue. Aba Abdullah then saw Ali al-Akbar say, O my beloved father, indeed I am complaining about the thirst, but it seems that you are more thirsty than I am, for your tongue feels like a dried piece of log. From this moment on, never shall you hear a complaint from me. What do you want me to do, father, as I have now returned? Abu Abdullah said, go back to your mother and see her and bid her farewell, for she is crying over you. His mother Layla had made dua, O the one who returned Yusuf back to Yaqub, return to me back my son Ali. And so her dua was answered. Ali al-Akbar came back to her, for the dua of a mother is never rejected. Ali al-Akbar bid his mother farewell, and then he bid the lady Zainab farewell, and one more time he bid his beloved father farewell. Ali al-Akbar returned to the battlefield, and he began to recite, أنا علي بن الحسين بن علي نحن وبيت الله أولى بالنبي والله لا يحكم فينا ابن الدعي أطعنكم بالرمح حتى ينثني أضربكم بالسيف حتى يلتوي ضرب غلام هاشمي علوي. I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the son of adultery has no right over us, and we have a greater right over the Prophet of Islam's message. And I will strike at you with my spear until it bends, and I will slash at you with my sword until it cracks, the strike of a Hashemi Alawi. Because, brothers and sisters, Ali al-Akbar was a valiant warrior, and the majority of the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada were in their old age, like Habib, like Muslim. You found Ali al-Akbar youthful with his strength, and so he charged the enemies, fighting them. They would say, is that the son of Hussein, or is that al-Murtada Ali, who has returned from his grave? From how busy they were focusing on his nur and light, Ali al-Akbar began fighting until he reached 200 people he has laid to rest. Ali al-Akbar, at that moment, they realized they could not fight him one-on-one, so they surrounded Ali and they rained arrows at his direction. One man then lunged a spear to the back of Ali al-Akbar. When he lunged the spear, Ali al-Akbar was then shot by the arrows, and one man slashed at Ali and his face. Ali al-Akbar then held on to the horse, covering the eyes, however, of the horse, and the horse took Ali al-Akbar to the enemy's side, and they surrounded him and began to strike at him bit by bit and piece by piece, until Ali al-Akbar called out, Aba alayka minni salam. Aba Abdullah came to his aid like a lion, angry, and he removed the men around him until he saw al-Akbar on the ground, and he began to say, say, oh my beloved Ali, after you, life has no purpose. We say to you, O Aba Abdullah, after Ali al-Akbar, life had no purpose to you, but after Akbar and you to us, what purpose does our life serve besides being your loyal followers? O Sayyidu Shuhada, on this day we will all become Al-Akbar for you, and we will defend your message, the message of your grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Ali al-Akbar was taken back to the tents, and he saw his beloved son on the ground with not a life in him, and his mother came, Zainab came, and they saw their beloved son without a soul on his body. Zainab began to say, Wa walada, oh my beloved son. Aba Abdullah said, oh indeed, our beloved son Ali, life has no more purpose after you. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, wa alayka ya Ali ibn al-Hussain, wa jami' shuhada Karbala, inna lillah وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون فرج عنا يا Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you on Akbar to grant us the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada and Ali al-Akbar. Oh Allah, we ask you to never remove the love of Ahlul Bayt from our hearts, to remove this disease from the Muslim world and those who have loved you, Ya Allah, from outside the Muslim world, and all those who have yet to see your light, Ya Rabbul Alameen, from Christian to Jew to Sabian, to all those free human beings out there who are waiting for your message and your message of Rahmah, Ya Arhamur Rahimeen. And we will recite Surah Al-Mubarakatul Fatiha. There has been a request. One of the members of our community, a dear sister and brother, both have been tested positive for the virus. May Allah heal them and heal all those who are sick. Let us send their direction and everyone else who is affected a Suratul Mubarakatul Fatiha. But before it, allow us of your salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allah.